Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, looking at the latest panic. Climate alarmism has largely dropped off the map because now we have COVID alarmism to replace it. I haven't studied COVID nearly as much as I've studied climate, but I have made a few observations. People come here for calm, rational analysis, and I'm going to try to do the same thing with COVID. I've been doing a lot of traveling lately and have seen thousands of people in the United States and in other countries. I haven't seen a single person on an airplane, at an airport, or in a restaurant who appeared to be sick. If anybody was coughing at an airport or on an airplane, they would definitely be noticed right now. People who are sick are probably staying home. I haven't seen one single person who appears to be impacted by COVID. However, everybody I see has been impacted by COVID alarmism. Millions of people are already out of work due to shutdowns of restaurants, tourism, and airline travel. Many of the people who've lost their jobs are young people who don't have cash reserves and are at risk of becoming homeless. The stock market is crashing in a similar fashion to what it did in 1929. People are losing their retirement and their life savings. And when corporations lose money, they lay people off. The 1930s were not only terrible for weather, but there was also a very deep depression which hurt tens of millions of people. This followed the 1929 stock market crash. COVID panic puts everybody in the world at great risk. Now let's look at the actual numbers from the Center for Disease Control. As of yesterday, they reported 3,487 cases and 68 deaths. Nearly half of those deaths occurred at one nursing home in Washington state. This graph from the Center for Disease Control shows the daily number of new cases in the United States going back to January. The current graph shows that the number of new cases peaked in early March and have declined slightly since then. This graph changes every day, and undoubtedly the final numbers will be higher than what they show now. The graph shows that the peak number of new cases in one day was just over 70 in early March. Now let's compare those numbers to the number of people who've died from flu in the United States during this season. From October 1st last year through February 1st of this year, at least 12,000 and as many as 30,000 people in the United States died from the flu. The number of flu deaths in the United States has been much higher than the number of COVID-19 deaths. Globally, the World Health Organization estimates that the flu kills 290,000 to 650,000 people per year. In other words, 40 to 100 times as many people around the world die every year from flu than have died from COVID-19. Now let's look at claims that have been made about COVID-19. They say that COVID-19 is much more transmissible than flu. They say that death rates are much higher than flu. They say that COVID-19 will overwhelm medical services. And they say that most COVID carriers are asymptomatic. I'm not an expert on this topic, but I am able to look at the numbers and see if they make sense. If COVID-19 was much more transmissible than flu and death rates were much higher than flu, then we would expect to see a lot more deaths from COVID-19 than we do from flu. However, flu has killed 40 to 100 times as many people as COVID-19 has. That tells me that either Claim 1 or Claim 2 are incorrect. You can't have higher transmission rates and higher death rates and end up with a much lower total number of deaths. Now let's look at the data from Korea, where 66 people died from COVID and the number of cases peaked in early March. The South Korean government has been credited with stemming COVID by carefully monitoring and tracking people with the disease. But if most COVID carriers are asymptomatic and COVID is much more transmissible than flu, then the South Korean strategy wouldn't have worked. That tells me that either Claim 1 or Claim 4 are incorrect, and possibly both of them are incorrect. Now let's look at Claim 3, that COVID-19 will overwhelm medical services. Far more people die from flu than have died from COVID-19, and every single one of them became critically ill before they died. Additionally, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the United States taken to the hospital every year because of automobile accidents, and far more from heart attacks. So why don't medical services get overwhelmed by the far larger number of people who are admitted for other reasons? In the United States, the approach which is being taken is to isolate everybody in order to protect the small percentage of the population which is vulnerable. The United Kingdom is taking a much more sensible and workable approach, which is to isolate the small percentage of the population which is at risk. If COVID behaves as alarmists have claimed, why have the number of cases in South Korea and China dropped off so sharply? I wouldn't expect that to happen until the behavior of the disease changed or most people obtained immunity. If COVID was very transmissible and most carriers are asymptomatic, then we would not have seen the decline which we've seen in South Korea and China. There's going to be new cases of COVID popping up for a very long time, and alarmists are going to remain hysterical and demand that everything remain shut down. This threatens to devastate the economy, put millions of people out on the street, and cause countless deaths. People in the United States need to stop being afraid, start asking some questions, and start thinking about taking a more sensible approach like what they're doing in the United Kingdom. President Franklin Roosevelt said during the 1930s Depression that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. The fear and panic of 2020 is a threat to everybody. Only 7,000 people have died from COVID around the world, but billions of people are threatened by the fear and panic. People need to get a grip on their fear and start thinking rationally. As always, Toto is remaining very calm. Visit him on the web at realclimatescience.com, where he's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and panic for a long time.